Hi, I'm Dr. Pajari, host of the Prognosis, which is a palliative podcast. And today we will be talking about what is hospice, questions pertaining to hospice. My guest today is Evelyn Perrez Rivera, who's back for more questions. So welcome and enjoy. So first question today is, what is hospice? A lot of people have no idea what hospice is. Just starting with the fundamental of describing hospice, a little bit of its origins. What is hospice?
So hospice is a program or is a model where is focused on end-of-life care. Usually whenever you come into hospice services, there has been a terminal diagnosis. And with that terminal diagnosis of 6 months or less, that's usually when patients come into the service. That is not to say that people cannot last more than 6 months within hospice, but definitely it is a model of care for terminally ill people. Now, when it comes to coverage of hospice, hospice is covered also by Medicare, and also private insurance also carves out for hospice services, because as we know, although we all know when we were born, we never know when we are going to be terminally ill. So we have had patients that come in the early stages of their lives, which might be pediatric hospice. There is such a thing. And then after 18 or more, then you are considered an adult. So then hospice is also for the adult population.
And actually I think one of the things that I wanted to say for hospice was, a lot of people think it's a place, whereas it is a program. So making sure people know that hospice can actually be practiced in a lot of different places. It can be practiced in the home. It can be practiced in a facility. It can be practiced in different forms of facilities. So there's that aspect. Another thing I wanted to talk about too is giving a background a little bit on hospice. It's a newer entity. I mean, the idea of taking care of terminally ill patients has gone on for centuries, actually. There are different. There's a different history going through different countries, like France or England, where there were establishments set up to take care of terminally ill patients. I think that's why people kind of associate hospice with a location. But in the U.S., what happened is in around the 1960s, that's when Dame Cicely Saunders, who was the founder or modern founder of the founder of the modern concept of hospice from England, started to assist with hospice formation here. And by the time we got to the 80s, that's when Medicare stepped in and started formalizing that process that we're talking about. So just giving a little bit of background there too, I think it's important to recognize that hospice is not a place, but actually like you said, it's a process, it's a program to take care of terminally ill patients. And that along with that it's had its origins pretty recently too. I was going to ask you, with hospice, what are some misconceptions? We can touch on those briefly too, with this idea of what is hospice.
Yeah. Well, in reference to the misconceptions of hospice, one common one is that you come to hospice at the 11th hour. And hospice can be involved in that care. Actually, it is more ideal for patients to come in early on in their diagnosis, because that way they can reap the benefits of the care and what hospice can do. Hospice is a wonderful program. There is multidisciplinary people or team members and disciplines that can help that patient with the social, with the spiritual, and also with the medical. We all know that unlike we know because we have done it and we understand it, but there is a time where whenever, not a time, I'm sorry, let me back it up just a second. There is a misconception whenever people see death on TV, that it is an on and off switch. And that is not death. Yes, there can be a sudden event, but death is process. Mm-hmm. And in those process, you have to address the spiritual part of it. And there might be social needs that might need to be addressed, as well as the medical. So coming into the hospice service, into a hospice service, that the majority of the time, this happens at home. Here in the U.S., yes, there are some hospice houses where patients are sent there for their final days. But usually because of the reimbursement, and I don't want to kind of just be convoluting with so much information, but they don't go there just to live. Usually hospice takes place wherever you are.
Right. I was thinking, so misconception, that's very true. Misconception that dying happens almost like in the media, or, watching someone die is just, as you said, on and off, or kind of process that's quickly wrapped up. That's a misconception. I would say some of the other misconceptions that I can think of is that hospice is only for cancer patients, or which is not true. Hospice is inclusive of all. We were just talking about terminal diagnoses. Another one is that hospice is only about the management of specific conditions, maybe just pain, which hospice we're going to get into is much broader than that. We talked about the idea of hospice not being a place, but actually a program. That's another misconception about hospice. And those are some of the ones that come to mind. There are a lot of misconceptions about hospice, which is why it's important to have this initial conversation about
Another
it.
misconception that people don't verbalize loudly, yet they have that question but don't dare to ask it, is whether hospice is there to speed up the process. And we are not speeding up the process. Many times with many of my patients, I would say we are not here to speed up the process or to slow it down. We are just here to go along with whatever happens in that journey. Again, that we are not here to speed up the process. Then morphine is not the demise of, because they usually associate hospice with morphine. And the morphine is bad, and morphine will put you to sleep, and morphine will kill you, expediting the process, when in fact it is not like that.
Yeah, perfect. Another misconception, absolutely. Hospice doesn't speed up the process of dying. Hospice doesn't also prolong the process of suffering. Hospice, when well done, is an adjunct to make sure that you recognize the exact elements of what is going on in the decline over time to give someone a quality passing, and that requires expertise. So again, I think we covered kind of the concept of hospice. Hospice is definitely a program, a process, not a place. There are many misconceptions around hospice, it's something that is relatively new in terms of medicine, along with palliative care and subspecializing in it. So perfect. We'll answer more questions next.
I wanted to kind of just come back about the place on where it takes place. And at the beginning, when I started doing hospice over 10 years ago, I had a patient that had substance abuse issues, and he came on service because of the demise of all that drug use. So he used to live with his daughter, but there were times when he went back into the streets, and I knew where to find him. And although it's very painful to see someone come out of the shelter of their home and just be outside, and you know that it was not the ideal environment, yet you have to have compassion for those people. And I used to see him. I knew exactly where he was, and I used to see him there where he used to hang out. And that is really speaks to the essence of what hospice is, compassionate care. It speaks also to it takes place wherever they are. And although how many times did I begged him, let's just go ahead and go back home, that did not happen. But understanding that I met him where he was at.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.